Coming up on this episode.
I didn't want to be angry all the time. I didn't want to be depressed, or I didn't want to have such a short fuse. I didn't want to allow little things to make me pissed off all the time. I wanted to just be at a place where I could just be chill.
West of the 7-3, eastern, there is large urban control.
Low pass, show of force confirmed at the enemy.
Outside the wire.
Guns good.
Welcome back, Outside the Wire podcast. Greg and Chad here together and ready to kick off our third episode. And we're going to talk about purpose today and how, we talked about purpose in the last podcast and how purpose is kind of the combatant or anti-depressant, if you will, because, I battled depression really bad about 2 years ago. I was really isolated myself a lot, avoided any kind of conflict, avoided any kind of dealing with any emotions, any kind of problems in myself. And my go-to was sleep. I have a black leather couch upstairs and it's super comfortable, and I just cozy up on a little blanket and just pass out. The worst part about it is I was always tired, and I'd be on this bed and I'd be comfortable on this couch, but I couldn't actually sleep because while I'm avoiding everything and not dealing with it, my brain is spinning constantly. I'm just trying, I can't resolve the stuff that's going on in my head. I'm trying to avoid it, and I'm retreating to this place of, avoidance where I'm trying to just sleep, but it's not doing me any good. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I wanted to talk about how finding something that can get you to want to get up, want to get out the door, and do something with yourself that makes a difference or is meaningful or has some level of importance to you. And when you can do that, how impactful it is and how rewarding it is and how it can pull you out of depression.
Purpose is huge. And this is why I say this, because for me, I didn't deal with depression much like that, like where I was sleeping all the time. I was actually the opposite. I didn't like to sleep. I felt I had to move, and keep going like a Energizer bunny. And to me, that I'll take you back to all right, when I dealt with my initial injury, what do you think my purpose was? My purpose was my daughter that I didn't meet. And when I was injured the way I was hit, right, the RPG came in, screaming in, saw the sphere, everything in slow motion, big explosion. I didn't get knocked out either. And I went back and I came forward and I'm like, what the hell was that? And
I want to paint the picture a little bit more clear for everybody so they really understand exactly what happened. So you're in an AAV, right?
Oh, yeah. So,
And you're in Baghdad.
Which an AAV is an assault amphibious vehicle. It's think of it like a lot of people, when you say the word Bradley, they understand what that is. They understand what a tank is.
Right.
This is just a troop carrier. And we're in Baghdad and we're in a firefight, and RPGs are a rocket propelled grenade. They go over the shoulder. Everybody sees in the movie, they make this god awful screaming sound when they go whipping by you. And that was like the weapon in 03 that they had that was like their go-to.
Because it's scary as shit.
Yeah, but it's inaccurate as hell. It zips this way, it zips that way, it goes in the air. So okay, so now I'm hit, and I know, oh, this ain't good. And, you know, I sit there and go, ooh, my wife's going to kill me. Like, and I'm thinking this. I'm thinking this, man.
You get hit in the face
I get hit in the
with an
face.
RPG. This is like sums up marriage.
It does.
Completely.
It does.
You get hit in the face with an RPG, and you're not thinking about, where's my jaw?
Yeah, no.
The first thing
Couldn't
that comes to
even-
your head is, my wife's going to kill me.
I couldn't even feel my face at the time. And I really kind of was still in awe, like, what just happened?
Right.
Until I put my hand up here, and then I'm like, ooh, that ain't good.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a thought. I'm like, I'm in big trouble. My wife's going to kill me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I ain't dying here.
Yeah.
So I started to develop a purpose right then and there. And my purpose was my daughter. And before we stepped off the line of attack, which March 21st in 03 is when we started the air war and the ground war at the same time. And when we pushed into Iraq itself, I had these pictures of her, and I kept them in, they call it a squad leader's notebook. If, you know, Marines can understand what this is, it's a green book. You would write
Yep.
all your ammo crap in it. You would write what your guys each had. You might write some pros and cons in the back of it of your Marines, like, because of course in the field for some reason we have to do pros and cons on how they're doing.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right. So
Well, as Marines, we're always efficient. We like to multitask.
yeah, it's fair enough. So I told myself I had no problem going to fight this war if I got pictures of my daughter. The day we stepped off, like the day that my gunnery sergeant came in kicking me, that day prior, I got pictures of her, and I'm like, "Whoa, that's a sign." So I took those pictures, and they went in that squad leader's notebook, and it went inside my flak behind my
Sappy
my
plate.
sappy plate, which is bulletproof armor. So if you get shot in the chest, and I kept that with me the entire deal, and I had that book all the way up until I got shot in the face with the RPG, and I ended up losing that book. This is a crazy story. You're gonna like this, but the book, obviously, when you get injured to the point you get injured like that, they're taking your helmet, they're taking your weapon, they're taking your gear, and then they're making you walk to a helicopter and get on a bird. It was a big mess. We'll get into that another time. But I lost that book for 7 years until I got called by a Marine sergeant that was in charge of dermo gear, and he's like, "Hey, I have your book here. Do you want that back?" And he mailed it to me, and I have it today, to this day, and it's kind of amazing to still say I have that. So my purpose right then and there is I knew I wasn't dying here, and I was going to go forward, and I was going to meet my daughter.
Yeah.
Right? Now, mind you, my head was the size of a basketball, probably bigger. My jaw's wired shut. I remember waking up in Rota, Spain for observation. When I met my daughter for the first time in Bethesda, that purpose kicked in. Like that, I felt what that purpose was all about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My daughter was so quiet and so peaceful and so surreal with me. It was like, man, you didn't get shot in the face. Everything's good. You got your kid, you know? And that was amazing to me. And I used that for me right at that time and moment to get through the years of surgery, to get through to where I am at in law enforcement today, because I couldn't sit down and let that part fail. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, that was my purpose. That was what I took, and I kept it here right in that heart, and I pushed forward with it. And you know, I had trials and tribulations on the way. I got depressed, and you know what? My wife was very supportive at times, and she's like, "Hey, you need to suck it up. You need to move on. Like you need to get going." Because there would be days I'd look in the mirror and go, "What the hell am I going through?" What, you know, I had this acrylic deal that came. I had bolts here and bolts here, and it came in front of my face, and I had to live with that for years. I had to live with the trach in my throat, you know, for a good 6 months before they were like, "All right, we don't need it anymore." That wasn't, you kind of thinking like you look like Frankenstein. And then I looked back and I went, well, all right, I got my limbs. I can walk. I can,
Yeah.
you know, so what? I got some extra hardware.
Well, it's always amazing too when you think about there's always someone who has it worse than you do.
Yeah.
And you're like, that was some of the times like you pull me out of it. I'm like, yeah, I got wounded in combat, and yeah, I'm dealing with some stuff. I lost some really close friends when I was in Iraq. But I have all 10 fingers, all 10 toes, and I'm a fucking handsome dude. Like, what am I, depressed about?
Yeah.
But emotions they're such a difficult thing to understand, especially when you have not been trained or taught how to deal
That's true.
with emotions. And I believe that depression comes from, it's not like you wake up one day and you're depressed. And maybe, everyone has a different experience with depression. And mine was very gradual. It was not being honest with myself for a very long time and continuing down a path of making slightly bad choices over and over and over and over again. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just avoiding doing things that were good for me. On the long run, always doing things that were good for my feelings in the short term. And it was like basically what led to my depression was that idea of a death by 1,000 cuts. So it's a tiny little nick or scrape to your ego, emotion, whatever it is, and it just gradually gets worse and worse and worse. And I think for me, what depression ultimately amounted to was this feeling of being overwhelmed. I had let too many things go unchecked for too long. I was in the Marine Corps. I was in really good shape, PT stud, if you will. When I got out, I let that kind of slack.
Probably the first thing to go with most people.
Yeah. And for some people, that's not a big deal. For me, it was. And, all these other little things, not really understanding who I was, having this identity issue where I was like, always wanted to be this Marine I was when I was in my 20s. Well, I'm in my 30s and pushing 40. You got to allow yourself to be a different person. And so I was just not really doing good things for myself. So it just got worse progressively. And one of the other things I was dealing with was when I got wounded, I don't know if the RPG to the face led to a traumatic brain injury for you, but when I got wounded, the concussive blast cracked my helmet and gave me a traumatic brain injury. And the symptoms for traumatic brain injury are very similar to PTSD and kind of compound things. So it's kind of you're dealt a bad hand on both sides. Like you're dealing with emotional trauma and you're also dealing with some brain damage. And I had really bad short-term memory. And that really bothered me. So I couldn't remember stupid little things that we all say, like, oh, I can't remember I put my keys or I forgot my wallet or whatever that stuff. But like, it was worse than that. It was, my wife would say, hey, remember, your son's birthday? And I'm like, no. What? I couldn't remember any of the details. And all of those things just became depressing. And I just lost the will to do positive things for myself. And, we talk about this home-based program that I went through, and you talk about the vet center counseling and all these different things that I did to kind of teach myself the skills that I needed to learn to get through this. And what I realized was the anger and the irritation and the just frustration that I was constantly dealing with, to deal with the anger and the emotions and the anger and the pain or whatever, I tried to numb that. And by not dealing with it, I was numbing all of the good. And that's basically what led to depression. It was like, I just wasn't ever feeling anything good. I was just always just blah. And so one of the things that when I went to their home base program, what they talked about, and we talk about purpose, that purpose doesn't have to be this huge thing that you're striving for. Like yours was obviously getting better so that you could be a dad to your daughter is huge, and that's awesome. But purpose doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be a little purpose every day. You know what I mean? Like
Going for a walk.
yeah. So for me, my counselor, he would talk about these small little things that I needed to do. And he started asking me like, what makes life enjoyable for you?
Stop and smelling the roses.
Yeah, a little bit, like, and so I started to, I was trying to be as honest as I could. And like one of the things that I really love riding my dirt bike. And he's like, well, when's the last time you rode your dirt bike? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't in a while. And he's like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, and they started giving me all these excuses. And what I loved about his approach was he cut through my bullshit like so fast. And he's like, stop giving me excuses. Start talking about like ideas to make it right.
Right.
And so what he made me promise to go through my calendar. And he's like, when you know you got to go to work, you make an appointment to go to work. When you know you got to do these other responsibilities, you set an appointment to do these responsibilities, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, set an appointment for next week to go ride your dirt bike. And I'm like, that sounds so stupid. He's like, no, I'm serious. Put a day in the calendar. Whether you want to or not, doesn't matter. Do it. Just like, okay. So I set an appointment. Wednesday next week, I'll go ride my dirt bike. And it was amazing how hard it was on Wednesday. Like I put it in the calendar. And I'm like, I don't want to go ride my dirt bike. Like, and I was like pissed off at myself. And all these emotions that you deal with over something stupid, like not wanting to ride your dirt bike when you know that you love riding dirt bikes. So I'm like, all right, I promised I'd do it. I'm going to stick by it, and I'm going to do it. So I go load up my truck. I get it out there. I go to the trail. I fire it up, and I start riding, and I'm like 10 minutes and I'm just like not enjoying myself. And it was like a chore. But then what happened was after I did it, I'm like, oh yeah,
That's what it's like.
I fucking love riding this thing. And like that sense of joy and like enjoyment and those chemicals in your brain that are good for you started coming out. And I'm like, thank God I actually like followed through and did what I said I was going to do. Because at the end of the day, I had so much fun. And when you look at your brain from a scientific, basic level, we're Marines, we're grunts, so I'm not going to go too into the science because I don't even really understand it. But basically, you've got good chemicals and bad chemicals in your brain. Not necessarily bad chemicals, but chemicals that make you feel good and chemicals that make you feel bad. And when you consistently do things that make you feel sad, depressed, whatever, it builds up over time. And when you do things that make you feel good in the moment, it gives you like a momentary release of oxytocin or, whatever. But when you do it consistently over time, it can't be like a momentary, like, I feel bad, so I'm going to do something that makes me feel good. Like that's where you get into bad habits. That's where, things like eating sugar makes you feel good in the moment. And that's where you lead to like bad diet habits. And you're like, well, I feel depressed, so I'm going to go eat some ice cream. But when you do something that is positive, like I feel bad, so I'm going to exercise. And you like do something that is good for you, not necessarily something that just feels good. That's when you start creating these habits of things that actually lead to pulling you out of that depression. And that's what it was for me, is my purpose wasn't necessarily something like magical. Like I wasn't gonna, like my purpose was to be a XYZ, or, like I wanted to be a good dad. I wanted to be a good husband. And those are awesome purposes to have. But like for me, my purpose was I just wanted to be content. I didn't want to be angry all the time. I didn't want to be depressed, or I didn't want to have such a short fuse. I didn't want to allow little things to make me pissed off all the time. I wanted to just be at a place where I could just be chill. You know what I mean? And so what this counselor was working with me was to start just, whether you want to or not, do things that you enjoy and creating a habit. And it's such a silly idea to force yourself to do a habit or a hobby that you like. But when you do it over time, it's so good for you. And like one of the things that I did recently was, within the last year, I committed to working out as much as possible. And actually just within the last 2 months, I realized that like for me to feel content and for me to feel happy, I needed to be physically fit. There's so much positive benefits from being physically fit, but one of them for me is just that self-image. When I look in the mirror and I see someone that I feel proud of in the mirror, to me, that is one of those things that helped me get out of depression. Because as you get older and you've been out of the Marine Corps for a while, like when you get out of shape, it's depressing.
You don't fit in your uniform anymore that you did when you were 19,
right.
And you never will.
Yeah. So I had this Marine who we're gonna have on the podcast as well. He's a former, he's a bodybuilder now. He owns basically a coaching business, and he coaches people, and he's a good dude, and I'm excited to have him on the podcast as well. But he created a workout routine for me, and I told him what my goals were, and the workout routine that he sent me was way harder than I was expecting it to be. And he's like, all right, here you go, dude. Like, hit it. And so I started doing it, and I'm like, this sucks. And I did like the first two, and I'm like, you know what? All of those emotions of like, I don't actually want to do this. I don't want to get up. Because it's like an hour-long workout, at least every day. And I think I have 1 day off. And it's a lot to commit to. Like, I wouldn't suggest that anybody go from not working it out at all to like this workout routine. But for me, it was like where I needed to be. It was taking me out of my comfort zone. But that what I was learning was the motivation versus discipline. I didn't feel motivated when I woke up to go out and do this workout routine that he gave me. But I knew that by being in the Marine Corps, I knew that if I could commit to being disciplined, that the more times that I did it, the easier it would become.
Yep.
And I'm so thankful to have had that experience of being in the Marine Corps, knowing that when you do that, when you build that habit, that it does get easier. Mm-hmm. And so I committed to doing it. I started doing it, and every day gets a little easier. And there are days where it sucks, and it still sucks. But I don't let myself have any excuse not to. And the reward after is so good. Like, and I think that my message about anxiety, depression, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, all that stuff, dealing with this stuff 100% sucks. You got dealt a shitty hand if you were, wounded in combat, or if you experienced PTSD. It sucks. And the path to getting out of it is hard, and it also sucks. It's a lot of hard work, but if you know that by being consistent and doing the things that work over time, you can look back and say, I've made a ton of progress. I am way better today than I was a year ago, 6 months ago. And when you start building this consistent positive chemical in your brain of doing things that you're proud of, doing things that you know are good for you, that's how you battle, in my opinion, from my experience, how you battle depression. And
to find purpose.
Yeah. And you have a reason to get up. You have a goal to achieve. And, you know, and one of the things I encourage you to do is if you're reading or listening to this podcast and you like it, there is so much content out there. There are so many good books. There's so many other good podcasts. Fill your brain, your time with good content that reinforces this positive path. Don't allow yourself to only isolate yourself and reinforce your negative thoughts with your own more negative thoughts. You know what I mean? Because when you're in that depressive state, you are your own worst enemy. Because you can't encourage yourself to get out of it. You need help. You need to like reach out to someone.
Right. You know, I'm going to kind of go to, you're talking about the gym and how, you know, working out gave you purpose and you're getting you out of depression. So I woke, one day sitting around a fire, hold my beer type thing, right? And I'm sitting around with some friends and I think it's a good idea. Let me go run a marathon. I hadn't done anything for myself for a while. The Marine Corps Marathon is a pretty big deal, and I just ran that in October of last year. So let me tell you about that journey and purpose and exactly what you're talking about in building habits.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, running a marathon, right? Training for a marathon, it's the same as what you're talking about, that workout routine, right? Yeah, 3 miles, that's easy. 6 miles, no problem. 10 miles, all right, we're starting to get a little more. When you start to start training for 20 miles, 15 miles, you have to develop a lot of time and energy in putting that. And there were days I got out there, and you know they talk about that runner's high? I felt it a few times, and I'm telling you, when you got that, it was like I could run through a wall.
Yeah.
But then there were days you wouldn't get it, and there were days that you're looking at life going, why the hell did I am doing? What is the purpose of this? Why? My knee hurt, my back hurt. It would be weeks that stuff would go. But I continued to develop repetitiveness with it.
Right.
At least make sure that I ran 3 times a week to keep that going, and that I would do my short runs and my long runs. It became very difficult, a very difficult challenge for me to juggle that and my family. But you know what? When I ran the Marine Corps Marathon, there's a saying in the Marine Corps, right? If it ain't raining, we ain't training.
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it went tenfold. 17 miles of that marathon was in the torrential downpour to the point that I was soaked from head to toe, and we had to do this thing called beat the bridge. And by mile 17, you had to get across basically the highway out there. If you didn't, they rerouted you and you didn't complete the marathon. That was a very challenging moment for me, but you know what it gave me? It gave me a purpose. There were points I got depressed. I was kicking the ground. I was getting upset. But I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep trucking. I'm going to keep moving. And the Marine Corps, I think, helped me with that, you know, because that's how we're trained, right?
Yeah.
No matter how bad life gets or, you know, that carpet goes out from underneath you,
Yeah.
that's in the past. You got to deal with that, but keep pushing, keep going forward. And I have the medal, and I'm really proud of that. And that was a huge thing for me. And that's a recent thing that I've done.
Yeah.
So, right, you think I took my punishment there? I can sign up. So the Semper Fi Fund is a great program for anybody, Marines, military. They take all walks of life in there, and they will empower you to do cycling, running, golfing, whatever it is you want to do and you're passionate about. They'll get you started to figure that out.
Right.
And I just signed up for the Spartan Run, the 13-mile. It's called The Beast. It's going to be in Killington, Vermont, and it's in September. And I'm going to run 13.1 miles. Now that seems like not so bad, right? Half a marathon. That's easy. But no, now there's 11 obstacles that I have to do, and for every obstacle that I can't do, I got to do 30 burpees. So, you know, the weather out here in New England is kind of cold, and it gets difficult to get out there. But yeah, that's my next purpose. That's my next goal that I'm going for.
You finished one marathon, and you're already setting your sights on the next thing.
Yeah, I don't know why, but
well,
it's
it's a thing that I want to talk about because it is real. So when you're battling depression, anxiety, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, all of these things that, are combat-related injuries that are mental, the world can become overwhelming. But it's amazing what you can accomplish. If you look at some of these other Marines, these other combat, traumatically wounded guys who've lost limbs, all this stuff, and you look at some of them, you look at what they've accomplished, it's absolutely amazing. And I would be willing to bet if you went to every single one of them and you learned about their life story, it wouldn't be like, well, I got both my legs blown off and then 10 minutes later I was running a marathon. That's not how it is. It's incremental. So if you're dealing with something where you're depressed, you're battling something where it's just mental and it's hard, what I believe is you set your first goal, your first purpose should be something small, something that you can achieve.
Yep.
For me, it was, I need to get my butt off the couch and not go back there every day. It's a small little thing. And I made myself a promise, like, I'm going to do something else. Instead of going and laying on the couch when I feel upset, I'm going to get up my dirt bike and go ride. And that was my shift. And what you were talking about when you started training for your marathon, you start building trust in yourself.
Yep.
So you said, hey, I want to be able to run 26 miles. We didn't start day one running 26 miles.
Nope.
You started at 3 miles.
Yep.
And when you built that trust, you're like, okay, hell yeah, I can make 3 miles. Let's do 6 miles. Let's do 9 miles, 12, 15. You keep building it up. What you do is you start building a trust in yourself that you can accomplish something better than or more difficult than you could yesterday or the day before. And it's so important to create that trust in yourself, because I think when you are battling depression, one of the things that, I'm just starting to kind of realize right now while we're talking is you've lost trust in yourself.
Yep.
You've lost confidence in your own ability to take care of yourself or to do things that make you happy, and you've lost trust in other people. And when it comes to your mental health, your physical well-being, you have all of these resources available to you. You have the VA, the Vet Center. You've got so many programs out there, Wounded Warrior Project. There's just, we live in such an awesome time right now where the culture is so supportive of veterans. There's literally helping hands everywhere you go. But it has to start with you and your own desire and your own purpose to get going and take it from them. I mean, you can complain about the VA not helping you, but at the end of the day, like, yes, the VA was designed and the purpose of the VA is to help you. But the reality of it, if you're being 100% honest with yourself and everyone else, your responsibility is to yourself. And no one is going to do it but you. So getting out there and starting to do it is like, you got to take that first step.
I want you to look at it like this. In the military, right? You get up in the morning, you have chow. You go PT. You go out to the range. You come back, you have chow, right? You go out to the field. This was your routine day in and day out. And you couldn't say no, because where did you end up if you said no?
Right, the pit.
The pit, right? and boot camp. But if you said no, like if you absolutely refused to do it, not do it, you ended up in the brig.
Right. Oh,
You could get locked up for it, right?
Yeah.
Now in civilian, being out of the military and being on your own, I think it's even tougher sometimes because you can be your own worst enemy, right? The depression can get in your head. Yeah, I don't feel like doing that. That hurts. I don't want to do. Why don't I want to do that? Because you don't have to do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, you have no one else out there holding you accountable.
Right.
So, like when you're talking about, you're in the Marine Corps or the military or whatever, you have someone else holding you accountable.
Right.
So, which actually it's good in some ways because you were pushed to do things you were never thought you were able to do before. But at the same time, it's also a little bit detrimental because when you get out, you've lost
it.
that person or that organization that pushes you to do the things that you can. And now you have to rely on yourself.
And that's anybody in the military. That's not just a wounded warrior. That's anybody.
Right.
You've had 4 years, 3 years, 6 years of being told what to do, and now you come out and you still have to find your own purpose and go, okay, I'm going to get a job because that's what I got to do. I got to make the bread.
Right.
All right. Well, the PT goes out the window, right? Those things that you are automatically told to do, like the program that I did down in Virginia. We went and PT'd every morning. You were with home base. You PT'd it. You PT'd all the time. That's part of good, healthy living.
Right.
You know, it's even if it's 20 minutes a day, get your butt up, get off the couch, go for a walk, go snowshoeing. I don't know, go skiing. I enjoy skiing, so I do that, you know, at least once a week. You know, those are the things that these resources, the Veterans Center, the Semper Fi Fund, the Wounded Warrior, they offer those opportunities for you to start those baby steps and start to be able to crawl before you can go on a full run and deal with it, you know. And I wish, you know, I hope like listeners listening to this going, wow, there's things out there that I can do. And, you know, they're out there. They're so out there, and you got to find your purpose in life and what motivates you. If video games motivate you, I'm not saying to sit there 7 days a week playing a video game, but if you like to sit down and play Call of Duty, make sure you pencil 2 hours, an hour a day, you know, to sit there and get some me time.
Yeah, I agree. And so when you talk about video games or these kinds of things, one of the things that I've learned that is a good way to kind of allow yourself to enjoy some things. Let's say video games are your thing. I play some video games. I like it. What if you decided, hey, I want to do this today, and video games were your thing? Video games can also be a retreat. It can be also your way of avoiding reality. You can say like, oh, I don't want to deal with today, so I'm going to go play video games. Well, what if instead of just going straight to video games when the day sucks, you go and you say, I will allow myself to play video games for 1 hour after I've worked out for 20 minutes.
Yeah, great.
Now you've allowed yourself to do something that you enjoy, but you've rewarded yourself with doing that once you've done something that you know is good for you first. I think it's really important, like you said, to be consistent and do things that are good for you. There are, like you said, so many resources available that in this day and age, the number of veterans that are committing suicide is staggering. It's awful, and it absolutely sucks. And there's no easy way to fix it. There's not we can't hold the VA responsible for everything. We can't say the military needs to change their mission or any of those things. I truly believe it has to come down to the individual's responsibility, because at the end of the day, it's your life. It is, you can decide whatever you want to do with your life. People have overcome so many crazy levels of diversity all throughout history. There's thousands of stories of people who have been through the absolute worst thing you can possibly think of and still come out and done something meaningful with their life. So I don't think that allowing yourself to slip into a victim mentality where you put the blame or the responsibility of someone else to making your life good or whole again, I think your best course of action is always going to be to take that responsibility on yourself. If you have ever heard of Jocko Willing, Jocko is a Navy SEAL, is commander of Task Force Bruiser. He's got a great podcast. and he hammers home constantly. His thing is extreme ownership. And I started listening to his podcast a couple years ago, and it was a buddy of mine, not military, he was just a coworker. He was listening to it, and he was all motivated, and he was jacked up, and he was telling me all about it. And he was like, dude, I think you would love this podcast. Like, he knew I was in the Marine Corps. He was all about it. He's telling me all about it. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'll check it out. And the first 5 minutes, I'm like all motivated. I'm like, hell yeah, like this is awesome. But when I started getting down to like the grit of it, Jocko's biggest message, and he always comes back to it, is extreme ownership. And basically what he's saying is, where you are in life is your fault. It is 100% on you. Yeah. And that, when you're in a dark place, that is one of the hardest things to hear. It is not what you want to hear. It is not something that's going to pull you out of your hole and make you be like, oh yeah, absolutely, my fault. I'm going to fucking march on and pull my head out of my ass, and here we go. It's not easy. But what it does allow is, if you look at it in the right light, it is so empowering, because what it does do, when you really think about it, is it takes the responsibility off of everyone else and it puts it on you. And yes, that can be overwhelming, but it can also be really freeing. It can give you so much freedom, because what it's saying is, wherever you want to be in life, you have the ability to be there. It is up to you. If you want to not be depressed anymore, you don't have to blame the VA and wait for the VA to fix you. You don't have to blame the Marine Corps for where they sent you to, and you got shot in the face with an RPG. You don't have to blame the RPG or the dude who shot it. You can say, yeah, I got hit in the face with an RPG, but I also still stand upright. I'm still above ground, and I still have lead in the pencil. Like, I can have a fulfilled life regardless of what happened to me. And you take that and you own it. And that's what he's talking about. And so one of the things I would encourage is, there's so much good content out there. There's so many good books, so many good podcasts, so many people out there that are saying the same message. Yeah. Find people that you can identify with, that you trust, that you agree with, that challenge you, that encourage you, that motivate you. Fill your day and your head with those good, positive, encouraging things, and start living your life in a way that fulfills that purpose, that gets you out of that comfort zone, that makes you do things that you don't like but are good for you, that become easier and easier over time, and build that confidence in yourself. That when you're talking about, you started, running a marathon, when you look back now, you're confident that you could go run 26 miles if you needed to. Huh? That's awesome. For me, I'm confident that when I start feeling negative thoughts, emotions, feelings, I'm confident now that I'm not going to go retreat to the couch. And I'm confident that I can have a shitty day and tomorrow's going to be fine. I can end a day, wrap it up and be like, that day sucked, but I'm still riding my dirt bike tomorrow, or I'm still doing something that's positive. I'm still waking up at 7:30 and I'm going down and I'm working out and I'm doing something positive for myself, and I'm building these positive habits that lead to a life that's worth living.
There's a lot of self-help books out there. I mean, you can, if you like to read, you know what I mean? There's a lot of podcasts. That's why we're here. That's what we're talking about. Some people like to listen. Some people like to read, right? You have Jocko. Jason Redman writes the Overcome book, and he talks about his trials and tribulations and what he does. And those are great stories to sit down and remind yourself that live life to the fullest, because at the end of the day, just like you said, you're the one that's going to look back at your life and go, man, I got to go do some diving. I got to go do some skydiving. I ran a marathon and I worked my way up to that. I didn't have someone telling me to get out there and do it.
Right.
You know, I went in the Marine Corps. I'm damn proud of it.
Right.
You know, those are the things that, you know, I was a good father. I was, whatever your purpose, that's what you got to find. You got to find your drive, that driving force, and everybody's got it in them, you know. And if it's getting to a point where, you know, depression's kicking in, get away from the booze. And if you can't because you're on it, you're drinking all the time, find somebody that can help you do that. You know, get away from that stuff that is giving you, like you said, and the other, you know, that temporary relief. You want to be happy with yourself. You want to be content with yourself.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
momentary relief
is horrible.
is the worst thing you can do. I can sit here and confidently enjoy this beer because this beer hasn't, like, I could take it or leave it. I enjoy the taste of it and I enjoy having one while I'm doing a podcast, but I don't need it like I used to need it. Like, I would be so stressed out to go to the VA because they would just drive me insane. They would literally take my Yeti, make a margarita, fill it up, drink this margarita on the way to the VA to go do my PT or physical therapy or whatever it was. And it became a way to get through things. And I'm like, alcohol can be something you enjoy normally, or if it's something that you can't handle, then stop doing it for a while and then get to where, I mean, I've never been an alcoholic. I don't have any alcoholics in my family, so I can't speak to being an alcoholic or what it's like. And I'm not a subject matter expert, but I know from my own experience, you can enjoy anything in moderation. You can enjoy sugar. You can enjoy whatever. You can even, you know, do drugs recreationally. You know, our culture is changing considerably, and what's considered okay and what's not okay is changing constantly. Yeah. If you can do things in a way where you enjoy it and it brings you joy, then I say do it. But if you're doing it to avoid dealing with your real issues, then I would say don't do it until you've hit whatever it is you're dealing with some real effort, and then reward yourself. Just say, like, I just can't get my ass out of bed today. Then get out of bed. Like, sometimes the answer is so easy. It's right there. Like, I can't do it. Yes, you can. It sucks and it's hard, but you actually can do it. And if you do it, and you do it consistently, and if they say it takes 6 weeks to create a new habit. So if you can set yourself a reasonable goal, like I've been doing these workouts once a day for like 4 weeks now. I've got 2 more weeks to get to where now it'll be a habit. And once I get to that point, I'm going to celebrate and be like, yes, like I've made it to where now my new habit is working out 6 days a week consistently. And that's my new habit. And as I progress, every workout gets a little harder. And it's not motivation. It's motivation on top of discipline. I have a foundation of discipline where I can trust myself first to be disciplined, to do the things that are good for me. And then on top of that, I can motivate myself to push myself harder and do more and better. But you have to build a foundation of discipline that you can trust yourself. And that, I think, is so important, to be able to trust yourself. And you can only trust yourself when you've been consistently doing things that are good for yourself. Yep. When you've been consistently doing things that are bad for yourself, you've become untrustworthy to yourself.
Yeah, that's the battle. It's within you, right?
Yeah. So I think that was a good place to kind of wrap this up. And we have a lot of new ideas and a lot of other topics that we're going to talk about. Again, we love your input and your feedback, and we want to hear if there's something that we said that has made the light kind of go on and you want to hear more about that. if there's things that we've talked about that you want to share, something that you've dealt with, or you have an idea of a resource or something that might be helpful to other people, this is, again, a group discussion. It's something that we want your feedback, we want your input on, and we're all here together to help each other, support each other. One of the things that I've learned over the past is, as Marines, as combat veterans, it becomes very easy to kind of exclude certain people based on their experiences, based on their MOS, based on whether or not they deployed. And I've recently become a big proponent of trying to avoid doing that stuff. I want to be as encouraging to everyone, because whether or not you deployed, whether or not you were injured, whether or not you were an outside the wire guy, whether or not you got a combat action ribbon, whatever it is, these fundamental principles of how to deal with depression, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, all this stuff, it's pretty consistent across the board. Human biology is pretty consistent regardless of who you are, and these chemicals that are in your brain are what they are. Whether you deployed, whether you were in a car accident, whether you had a traumatic upbringing when you were a kid, depression and anxiety, all these things are what they are. And I think if we can learn how to deal with them and then help somebody else, one of the best ways you can help yourself is by helping someone else and doing something good for someone else. So hopefully you got something great out of this. Hopefully you've got some ideas on how to be more disciplined and how you can maybe motivate someone else. Again, if you liked what you heard, share it with somebody else that you think might need to hear it. And please give us your feedback, interact with us, and be good to yourself.
Yeah, definitely be good to yourself. It starts with you. And thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Mayhem, this is Bravo 67 QRF. We are moving to contact exit gate 2. We are Oscar Mike.